Okay, we're gonna read the Big Orange Splot. The Big Orange Splot. The Big Orange Splot. By Daniel Manis Pinkwater. The Big Orange Splot. We'll see what it's about. A big orange spot. Mr. Plumbing lived on a street where all the houses were the same. So this is Mr. Plumbing, and he lives. Yes. Yes, Mr. Plumbing has a mustache. But Mr. Plumbing lives on a street. So Mr. Plumbing lives on a street where every house looks the same. So all the houses on Mr. Plumbing Street look exactly the same. So the houses look exactly the same in Mr. Plumbing Street. So let's see. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbing Street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then one day, so look, all the houses on the street look the same. Look, all the houses are brown with green windows, and the roof is a little dark green. So look, all the houses look the same. All the houses look exactly the same on the street. The houses are all brown, the windows are all green, and the top of the roof is a little bit of dark green, but all the houses look exactly the same. All the houses look exactly the same. They look exactly the same. So nothing is different about the houses.
Nothing is different except that.
A seagull flew over Mr. Plumbing's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. And he dropped the can, no one knows why, right over Mr. Plumbing's house. So this is a seagull, it's a type of bird. It was carrying a can of orange paint, and he was flying over Mr. Plumbing's house carrying that orange can of paint. And while the seagull was flying over Mr. Plumbing's house, look, he dropped the bucket of paint. So the bucket of paint is going to fall onto Mr. Plumbing's house.
I think the paint is gonna fall over. That's why the eagle wants to put the paint on there so it can look different.
So you think the seagull was flying with the paint so he could change Mr. Plumbing's house since all the houses look exactly the same? That's a good guess, yes.
A bird, a druggy's mouth, and druggy's bucket of force.
Yes.
Maybe they want their houses all orange.
Maybe they want their houses all orange, yes.
Maybe they want green on the bottom. So maybe maybe the house is green on the inside.
Okay, maybe the house is gonna be orange on the outside, yes. Yes, Ashton?
I think maybe the eagle wants to tell the ma'am to say I can make only one house all orange to be like my house like that.
Okay, so let's see. It made a big orange spot on Mr. Plumbean's house. Ooh, too bad, everyone said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange splot for a long time. Then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange spot. Someone said, Mr. Plumbean, we wish you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. So look, now Mr. Plumbean has a big orange splot on his house. Look, now Mr. Plumbean has a big orange spot on the top of his house. Mr. Plumbean, so his neighbors are saying that he has to paint it over, and they keep on telling him, Mr. Plumbean, can you paint your house? Can you paint your house? Can you paint your house? But Mr. Plumbean has not gotten to it yet. So far, Mr. Plumbean has a big orange spot on his house.
Miss, why you doing it again? Hello, everyone. You just wipe it.
Okay, let's see. He got some blue paint and some white paint. That night, he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue. The walls were white, and the big orange spot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same, but Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. So look, Mr. Plumbean is going on the roof of his house, and he started to paint. He didn't start painting on top of the orange spot. He started painting the rest of his house. So he made the roof of his house blue, and then he got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and he started coloring his whole entire house.
Ms.Dimitra, where is your Tubby's house?
Yeah, this is Mr. Plumbean's house. Right here. Now this is Mr. Plumbean's house. Now look, Mr. Plumbean's house looks different. Yeah, Mr. Plumbean's house looks different than all the other houses. Mr. Plumbean's house looks different than all the other houses. Mr. Plumbean's house is a rainbow because Mr. Plumbean got some red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. And he painted the roof blue, and the rest of the house is a rainbow. And now this is Mr. Plumbean's house right here. This is Mr. Plumbean's house. Right here, Mr. Plumbean's house. And now all the neighbors in the morning came out of their house, and they saw that Mr. Plumbean's house looks so much different than their house. There was the big orange spot, and there were little orange spots. There were strips. There were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, Mr. Plumbean has pooped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools. That night, he built a tower on the top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. So look, this is Mr. Plumbean's house. This is Mr. Plumbean's house.
The wood is so beautiful.
Yes, so many colors on it.
Yeah, the big man.
It has so many beautiful colors on it. Yeah, it has so many beautiful colors on his house. Yeah, look, he has so many beautiful colors on his house. And look, and now his neighbors.
Me too.
Yeah, so now his neighbors are seeing his house and they're saying, oh my God, Mr. Plumbing, what is he doing? But then Mr. Plumbing built a tower. He's going to add a tower on top of his house and a clock on top of the tower. So he's making his house even bigger than his neighbors.
Let me see. Let me
Let's
see.
see.
Let me see.
Let's see. We should.
Whoa! Oh my God! That's so beautiful. That is so big.
The next day, the people said, Mr. Plumbing has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, and slipped his houser. They decided they would pretend not to notice. So look, this is Mr. Plumbing's house. He added a tower over here. He added the tower with the clock. He did the tower with the clock. The tower with the clock.
Oh my God!
Yes, he added a tower with the clock.
Let me see that. Tower with the clock.
Yeah, he did a tower with the clock. Yeah, so now all his neighbors saw that now his house is a different color, and now his house is a different shape than theirs. So all his neighbors are looking at their house. That very night, Mr. Plumbing got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbing swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. They saw an alligator laying in the grass. Mr. Plumbing was drinking lemonade. So look now, Mr. Plumbing. Oh.
You can see it. That's why.
So now, Mr. Plumbing got his truck, and he put in his truck. He got a truck full of green things. So his car is filled of. He has a car filled of green things.
Wow.
So he planted palm trees. So he planted palm trees. Thorn bushes, onions, and then he got a hammock. So a hammock is where you lay on. And then he got a hammock. And then he got an alligator. So look what he's adding to his house. The alligator is right over here. It's right over here. Yup, he has an alligator now. Yup, he has an alligator right over here.
Oh my God! But our house is bigger than that. Me too, I see it.
Plumbing has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbing, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be and it looks like all my dreams, Mr. Plumbing said. The people went away. they asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbing to go and have a talk with him. Tell him that we like to hear before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours, or we can have a neat street. So look this. So this is Mr. Plumbing laying in his hammock. So this is Mr. Plumbing's hammock. This is Mr. Plumbing's hammock. So look, he's laying on his hammock. He's drinking his lemonade. And everyone is asking Mr. Plumbing, why is he changing his house? And Mr. Plumbing said that my house is me and I am it. So he's making his house the way he likes it. He doesn't want to have his house the same way as his neighbors do. He wants to have his house look a different way, look the way he wants it to look. So that's why he put all those decorations and is painting it a different color. Because those are the colors he likes and that's how he wants to make his house.
Yeah, you can't just force people to make it the same.
Exactly.
So that's copy.
The man went to see Mr. Plumbing that evening. They sat under the palm trees drinking lemonade and talked all night. So look, this is Mr. Plumbing's neighbor. And Mr. Plumbing's neighbor came over to convince him to change his house. So Mr. Plumbing's neighbor is trying to tell him, Mr. Plumbing, please change your house to look the same as ours. Let's see if the neighbor can convince Mr. Plumbing. Let's see if he can convince Mr. Plumbing. Let's see. Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of the street, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbing. So look, the next day everyone woke up and they thought that Mr. Plumbing turned his house back to normal. That's what his neighbors thought, because the other neighbor was going to go talk to Mr. Plumbing to convince him to change it back to normal. But that's not what happened. Look, this is Mr. Plumbing's house, and the next door is his neighbor's house. Look, this is his neighbor's house.
It's a boat.
And his neighbor turned his house to look like a boat.
A boat.
Yeah, so now Mr. Plumbing changed his house to look like a boat.
Where Mr. Plumbing? I want to see Mr. Plumbing.
Yeah, and then his neighbors went outside in the morning and they saw two houses that look very different than theirs. What have you done to your house? They shouted at the man. My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be and it looks like all my dreams, said the man who has always loved ships. He's just like Plumbing, the people said. He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in the belfry, and knots in the noodle. Then one day they went to see Mr. Plumbing late at night. They would sit around the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams and whatever else they wanted. Mr. Plumbing's house, the very next day, the person would set a challenge for his own house to fit his dreams. So look, this is the neighbor's house. It looks like a boat. And when they asked the neighbor, why did you change your house? He said, my house is me and I am it. So this is what the neighbor wanted. The neighbor wanted to change his house. And that's exactly and that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. He changed his house into a boat because that's what he wanted. That's how he wanted a house to look, like a boat. So look, I see a hot air balloon house. I see a castle house. Yeah, so I see a hot air balloon house, and I think a hot air balloon house. And a castle house.
Oh my God, what a house! Everyone change your house!
Yeah, a castle house and a balloon house. And now look, I see a castle house and a house with columns on it. Look, a castle house and a house with columns on it.
That's called Colin's house. Another castle house
Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumby and his neighbors, the stranger would say, this is not a neat street. Then all the people would say, our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be. And it looks like all our dreams. So now look.
Where's the stranger?
All the neighbors changed their house
Where's the stranger? You see the stranger.
All the people changed their houses to look just like they wanted. So we have Mr. Plumbing's house, the boat house, the hot air balloon. We have a castle. We have another castle. We have a mansion. We have a house with columns on it.
That's called Colin's house.
Yeah, so look, we have different, so now this is Mr. Plumbing's house. This is the boat house, hot air balloon house, a castle or palace, another castle, palace, and a house with columns. So now all the neighbors changed their house so we could look. They're inside their house. So now they all changed their house to look like Mr. Plumbing's.